Okay, so you probably know your blood type, right? A, B, O. It feels like one of those basic biological facts about yourself. But what if I told you that was only half the story? What if there's a hidden genetic switch that decides whether your blood type is just in your blood or if it's being broadcast throughout your entire body? Well, this is your secretor status, and it might just be one of the most important health factors you've never even heard of.
So let me ask you this. Is your blood type really stuck inside your veins and arteries? You'd probably say yes. But for about 80% of us, the answer is a surprising no. And once you understand that one little difference, you realize that it splits all of us into two very distinct groups when it comes to our internal biology.
So here's what we're going to do. First, we'll uncover this biological secret. Then we'll look at the actual gene that flips the switch. We'll compare what it means to be a secretor versus a non-secretor, then dive into why this is such a huge factor for your health. And finally, we'll figure out what this all might mean for you.
All right, so let's get right into it and pull back the curtain on this secret. What does it actually mean to be a secretor?
It's actually pretty simple. If you are a secretor, your body releases your blood type markers, these little things called antigens, into pretty much all of your bodily fluids. We're talking saliva, tears, mucus, the works. It's kind of like your body is broadcasting its personal ID card everywhere. But if you're a non-secretor, you don't do this. Your blood type markers stay put, right where you'd expect them, in your blood. Now, you might be thinking this is some rare thing, but check this out. About 80% of Caucasians are secretors. That means a full 20%, or 1 in 5 people, are non-secretors. So this isn't some tiny fringe group, it's a really fundamental split in how our bodies are designed.
So how does this happen? Well, it's not random at all. It's all decided by a single genetic switch. Let's take a look at the one little gene that controls this whole massive trait.
Okay, think of it like an assembly line in a factory. In secretors, there's a gene called FU2 that acts like the main power switch for the whole line. It flips on, starts the process, and allows your blood type markers to get made and then released into all your fluids. But for non-secretors, that FU2 gene, that power switch, is basically stuck in the off position. The entire assembly line just shuts down before it even starts. The result? Those blood type markers never make it into your secretions. And the genetics behind this are super simple. The secretor gene is dominant. That means you only need to get one working copy of it from one of your parents, and boom, you're a secretor. To be a non-secretor, you have to inherit 2 non-working copies, one from mom, one from dad. And that right there is exactly why being a secretor is so much more common. Okay, so we've got this genetic switch. So what? What does it actually do? Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because this one tiny difference leads to some really big metabolic and biological differences between the two groups.
Just look at this comparison. Non-secretors have way less activity of a key enzyme that's really important for gut health. And on top of that, their blood literally tends to be thicker and clot more easily. You can actually think of it as a spectrum. On one end, you have type O secretors. They tend to have the thinnest blood. And way over on the other extreme, you find type A non-secretors, who often have the thickest blood and the highest risk for clotting problems.
And this is where it all comes together. We've talked about the what and the how, but now for the really big question. Why does any of this matter for your health? Well, it turns out this hidden trait is a major factor in our risk for certain diseases. And here's the thing. The research is pretty clear on this. Being a non-secretor isn't a disease itself, but it's a huge risk factor. It's linked to a higher susceptibility to a whole bunch of different health issues, because it looks like secreting your blood type gives your body this extra powerful layer of protection.
Let's start with the gut. Non-secretors tend to have more problems with everything from cavities to peptic ulcers. They're much more likely to get infections from the H. pylori bacteria, that's a major cause of ulcers, because without those blood type antigens in the mucus, the bacteria can just latch on and set up shop much more easily. This can also lead to more issues with things like leaky gut. And if you need a really powerful example, just look at this. In some studies, almost half of all patients with celiac disease are non-secretors. Now remember, non-secretors only make up 20% of the population. So when you see them making up nearly 50% of a specific disease group, well, that points to a really strong connection.
The risks go beyond the gut, too. They extend to our respiratory system. It seems that without those blood type antigens lining the lungs for protection, non-secretors are just more vulnerable to damage from stuff we breathe in, like cigarette smoke or industrial dust. Researchers are even looking into possible links with autoimmune conditions like MS and Graves' disease. Now let's talk metabolism. Remember that thicker, faster clotting blood we mentioned? Well, here's where that comes back into play. It directly translates into a higher risk for cardiovascular problems, like heart attacks. Non-secretor status is also linked to a higher risk for type 2 diabetes and that whole cluster of issues sometimes called Syndrome X. Insulin resistance, high blood pressure, and so on.
When you boil it all down, it really comes down to defense. Those secreted blood type antigens act like a protective shield, almost like a slippery coating that prevents bad microbes from being able to grab onto our tissues. Without that shield, non-secretors are just more vulnerable. They face a greater risk for things like recurrent UTIs and candida overgrowth. And to make matters worse, they also tend to have lower levels of IgA, which is a key antibody that stands guard on all our internal surfaces.
So after hearing all of that, the big question is, what does this actually mean for you? How can you use this information? This really is all about the future of personalized health.
This quote just sums up the entire idea perfectly. Secreting your blood type gives your body an extra shield. It's a layer of defense against invading microbes and even against certain proteins in food called lectins. It really seems to be a clear evolutionary advantage that about 20% of us are just missing.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. We live in this age of personalized medicine, right? We're all sequencing our DNA to understand our personal risks. So could knowing something as basic as your secretor status be a critical key to all of this? A piece of information that helps you understand your body's unique weak spots and strengths, and maybe even unlocks a whole new path to better health? It's definitely some food for thought.